Hi, Mr. Schmidt-Huber. I saw you there for a second.
Yes, hi, good morning.
Good morning. Okay, I can see your picture is good and sound is good. So I'll just mute your mic and switch off the picture for the beginning. Hi, Adriano. This is Elma from UNTV. Just wondering if we can test your sound and picture.
Hello, good morning. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. That's very good. Thank you very much.
Alessandro, can just give the floor directed to Joseph, given the interest of time. It's okay.
Okay, she heard you.
Okay, great. Good morning.
Connecting now.
I saw this problem with the Zoom update as well for when we tried to enter the platform. So we had to join from the browser.
Good morning. Welcome to this press briefing of the Information Service in Geneva. Today is Friday, 8th of April, and we will immediately start the briefing with Mr. Joseph Schmidt-Huber, who is the FAO Deputy Director for Markets and Trade Division. Mr. Schmidt-Huber, you would like to update us on the latest monthly food price index and cereal supply and demand. You have the floor for your short remarks, and then we will open the floor to questions, also after having heard from WFP. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. I hope I can be heard. So good morning, colleagues, yes. Ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I would like to focus this intervention just on the soaring food prices. This is against the background of the war in Ukraine, but also a couple of other developments that are ongoing at the moment. Let me start with an overview. You are probably not surprised to learn that the FAO Food Price Index has reached a new all-time high in March. Everybody expected that, but you may be surprised to learn that the month-on-month increase in March was the second highest in the history of the index, and the index goes back to the early 1990s. So it was a giant leap up by 12.6% in February, from February. Only the price jump in August 2008, so that was at the height of the last world food crisis, was slightly higher. The economists amongst you may also be interested to learn that also in real terms, so when adjusted for inflation, at least as captured by the manufactured unit value, the prices have reached an all-time high. This is really remarkable, and it's not only for the aggregate or overall, but some of the sub-components are really jumping up enormously in terms of prices. So let me start with cereals. driven largely by the conflict-related export disruptions from Ukraine and the Russian Federation, cereal prices jumped by nearly 20%. And this was fueled also by concerns over crop conditions in US and in China, particularly for winter wheat in China. And the other big component, of course, is that Ukraine is the third largest exporter of maize. And so between the weather conditions, the war, and the important role of Ukraine and the Russian Federation for cereal markets, it's not surprising to see overall cereal prices to increase by nearly 20% in just 1 month. I think I should add here that rice prices are still largely unchanged, and that's really important. So that's a positive note. In fact, they are 10% below the levels a year ago. So that's something to bear in mind. The biggest jump was actually seen for vegetable oils, and vegetable oils jumped up by 23.2% in just 1 month. And this is, again, very unsurprisingly, because sunflower seed, and the two countries are the major producers of sunflower seed and sunflower seed oil, there is, of course, a massive supply disruption, and that massive supply disruption from the Black Sea region has fueled prices for vegetable oils, not only for sunflower, but also for palm, for soy, for rapeseed. And in addition to this, there are, of course, driving factors from supply constraints in many of the exporting countries for palm oil, Malaysia and Indonesia. And importantly, as we also have very high crude oil prices, there is demand pull simply through the biofuel sector. Also, meat prices are up, and they're also at the new all-time high. And that is largely due to the fact that there was a period of 18 months of supply destruction in Europe, in particular for pig meat. And that has come to an end. And with the outbreak of the war, there is an additional demand now in the wake of practically no supply, and that made pig meat prices jump. Some of the indicator prices, like the European pig meat price, jumped from €1.30 to €2 in just 1 week. There is also shortage because of avian influenza on the poultry side, and there's not enough cattle at slaughter weight on the bovine meat side. So just to add up and add the missing components, that's dairy and sugar, they are much more moderately up. So it's only by 2.6% for dairy and 6.7% for sugar. Sugar is still supported by the high prices for crude oil, and that drives up ethanol production and hence sugar prices. So if you want to sum it up in terms of where the well-behaved prices are, that's essentially for the rice pudding ingredients. So it's rice, sugar, and milk. These commodities are still relatively affordable, but everything else, in particular the wheat for bread, the meat, and the vegetable oils, have reached huge increases, have seen huge increases in prices, and we see significant price inflation. Let me conclude this intervention by drawing your attention to some of the measures that the FAO is now taking. So clearly, these very high prices for food require urgent action. And today, actually, as we speak, there is a special session of the FAO Council, and there is a new proposal for a food import financing facility. And if you have any question as far as that food import financing facility is concerned, I'd be very happy to entertain them. So I would like to leave it here, and I'm very happy to address your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmidhuber. And definitely, yes, there are questions, but I'd like to hear first from our colleagues before we sort of have all the food-related items. I would like to hear from our colleagues from the World Food Programme. Thompson is here, and you brought with us Mr. Sib Olo, who is on Zoom from Dakar, to tell us a little bit more about the food situation in West and Central Africa. I don't know if we can go directly to Mr. Olo. Thompson, if you agree.
Fully agreed.
Mr. Olo, bonjour, monsieur. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. I was here a few months ago, and we were worried about the food and food.
Monsieur Olo, on entend. votre voix est vraiment...
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
There maybe it's somebody who has the speaker mic on. In addition to you, I don't see
no.
other.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, sir. It's really impossible to understand what you're saying. Why don't we do it like this? Look, I'll go to the question for Mr. Schmidt-Huber, and then maybe in the meantime, if you could disconnect and reconnect, and if you had something, an earpiece or something with a mic, that would probably be much better. Let's try it like this so that we can hear what you wanted to say to the journalist. In the meantime, I'll go to the journalist for questions to FAO, and I'll see first Jamil Shadeh. Jamil, maybe introduce yourself for Mr. Schmidt-Huber.
Yes, sir. My name is Jamil Shadeh. I'm a journalist from Brazil. My question regarding the average height in March, can we know how much of this height was due to the war? I mean, is there any way of calculating half of this increase was due to the war, or a third, or whatever? That is the first question. The second question is about the mechanism that you mentioned that you're establishing. If you could elaborate on that. And thirdly, some Latin American countries had requested FAO some kind of intervention not to include fertilizers in the sanctions against Russia. Where is that at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you, Jamil. Mr. Schmidt-Huber.
Yeah, okay, so these are three very pertinent questions. As far as the first is concerned, no, we do not have a way of understanding how much exactly is due to the war. That would really require a clear definition of the impacts of the war. And there's a confluence of different factors, which makes it really hard to understand how much is the war, how much is due to, say, poor crop conditions in the US, poor crop conditions in China, drought in Brazil, etc., etc. So it's really a very complex thing, but no doubt, I mean, for some of the commodities where the two countries are really important, like sunflower seed oil or wheat, and in the case of maize also, in the case of Ukraine also maize, yes, so there is no doubt that these factors, that the war played an important role, but we are not able to really calculate this. Okay, let me move to the food import financing facility, which was the second point. Just a couple of features of that facility. The facility is, first of all, it's available on the FAO website. Both, there are two papers. One is essentially a paper, a proposal for decision makers, and the other one is technical background. So let me start perhaps with some of the features of the facility. This is essentially in response to the high food prices. So the idea is to alleviate the import costs for the poorest countries, and only for food importers. So food exporters are a priori excluded. And that is against the, so clearly consumers in food exporting countries also face higher prices, but the assumption is that governments in these countries can then essentially help these poorer consumers in the net exporting countries to cope with the higher food prices, because actually net exporting countries stand to benefit from the higher prices. It's essentially a balance of payment support at the country level. The volumes depend on how much needs to be financed. So if we look into only the countries that are in the low income and the lower middle income class of the World Bank's definition, plus a few IDA beneficiaries, we are envisaging a total financing volume of $25.3 billion. That will be on a credit basis, not on a grant basis. There are some interesting features like smart conditionality, which essentially means that countries who are eligible for the credit would have to commit themselves to added investments in agricultural productivity, which would work just like a an automatic stabilizer for their input needs in the future. So if they're now taking money out of the facility, that essentially would require them to invest in agriculture. And as they invest in agriculture, they would use less of the facility in the future. We are currently working on scaling this up into other elements, in particular fertilizer, but also energy used in agriculture, as well as other agricultural inputs such as pesticides and seeds. The scoping study is underway, and I probably have to finish this over the weekend. And so, yeah, we are working on this. That allows me to move to the next question, and that's essentially fertilizer in Brazil. There was initial reluctance to exclude fertilizers and food from the sanctions. In the meantime, a decision has been taken to exclude both fertilizer and food from the sanctions. And so a first shipment of potash fertilizer left Russia yesterday with the destination Brazil, just to address your question very specifically.
Thank you very much. Paula, introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning, Paula Giuliani. Yes, I'm with the New Humanitarian. I just wanted to know just sort of, I know that you can't specify exactly the impact of the various factors on the food price rises, but could we get a sense of to what degree logistical issues such as these freight bottlenecks that we've heard about are impacting the prices?
Yeah, again, I cannot quantify the impact, but the logistical factors play a big role. So there's essentially no exports through the Black Sea. Exports through the Baltics is practically also coming to an end. There are exports through Central Asia, and in fact, it's not easy to monitor the flows. So there are, quotes unquote, gray exports of wheat to the so-called stands from Russia that is taking place. There will also be, at least this is my hunch, there will be exports of fertilizer, which actually on a tonnage basis at the moment is more expensive than grains, to China, but also to the stands. But there is, I mean, comparing the logistical availability on trains with bulk shipment capabilities or through ships really suggests that there is an enormous bottleneck. There is no way that the freight rate, the transportation routes through Central Asia could compensate, could offset for the loss in shipment capabilities through the Black Sea, but also through other ports in Europe.
Thank you. Jamil, you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Could you explain what is this, whatever you mentioned, the fertilizer is going to Brazil. Was this negotiated with FAO? I'm not sure I understood when you mentioned.
Okay. So this was not negotiated through FAO. There was, and that was on Bloomberg and other media, there was a call with Secretary Vilsack about 4 weeks ago, where the situation was as follows. There was practically no appetite to exclude fertilizer from the sanctions. So up until recently, fertilizer was included in the sanction. That has changed, I think, about 10 days ago. I presented also at the G7 meeting, and it was essentially confirmed at the G7 meeting on Wednesday. And there was a message on Bloomberg yesterday that a ship loaded with potash fertilizer has left with the destination Brazil. That's what I have in terms of information right now.
Thank you very much. Emma, introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, Emma Farge from Reuters. I was hoping just for a little bit more information on the food import financing facility, please. So the special session of the FAO, is a decision going to be made, or is there a vote? Is that going to be decided today? And could you explain where this 25.3 billion for that would come from? Thanks.
Yeah. Very good questions. This is at the moment only a proposal. It was requested by several entities, including some of the member countries of FAO. The basic idea is just to alleviate the food import costs, the food import bills for net importers with high net import requirements and low income levels. And the 25.3 billion are the maximum that essentially appear if all food imports of these countries, so the low income and the lower to middle income countries, are completely compensated for. Obviously, that is on a credit basis, it is not on a grant basis. There is no decision made on who will essentially facilitate the facility. The proposal at the moment is that this will be within the DFIs. There was a serial import financing facility managed by the IMF in the 1980s, and that would be one of the models. Another model would be to have the GASP expanded in its coverage and cover food import bills now under the FIF, so under the food import financing facility. Another model is that the regional DFIs step up to the plate and they are helping to finance, etc. So all of this needs to be decided upon. At the moment, it's just to provide information to the DFIs that essentially shows how big the overall envelope would have to be, who the beneficiary countries would be, and everything else in terms of the details would obviously be would have to be decided by those who are signing the checks. The FAO stands ready to monitor the requirements. The FAO stands ready to monitor the impacts of the requirements. So we've already done some stress testing as far as international markets are concerned, because there is an endogeneity problem. The more countries benefiting from such a facility, the higher the upwards pressure on international prices. So we are trying to come to grips with the extent. And just to give you background information there, the $25.3 billion, and as I said, this is the maximum, would essentially cause an increment in international prices to the tune of 15 to 20%. So that's considerable. We wouldn't expect that the facility is used up completely. At lower levels, it would be proportionately lower in its impacts on international prices.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmid-Huber. That concludes the questions from our journalists. Thanks for this extensive briefing on the food price index. I'll try to go now again to Monsieur Oyo. On va voir si ça marche maintenant, monsieur.
Bonjour, vous m'entendez?
C'est mieux, oui, c'est beaucoup mieux.
Yeah. Okay, it's fine now. Okay, so and is the video okay?
We don't see you, but
okay.
It's okay. Maybe
okay.
It's easier.
Okay, so good morning again, everyone, and sorry for this technical issue. A few weeks ago or months ago, I was here and we briefed you about the food and nutrition security situation in the Sahel, and we were worried about the situation in the region, and unfortunately, the situation is worsening. The number of hungry quadruples in the region between 2019 and 2022. We are talking today about 38 million people in the Sahel and West Africa. If we add Cameroon, it's about 41 million people. And if you add CAR, it's about 43 million food insecure people in the region. So there is a sharp deterioration of the food and nutrition security in the region. 6 million children in the region are malnourished. And on top of that, we have almost 16 million people, urban people, that are at risk of food insecurity. The region is facing an unprecedented and very complex food crisis with multiple structural vulnerabilities and shocks. The region is recovering from the economy is recovering from the COVID impact, but still very slowly. Last year, the agricultural season was extremely bad, and millions of farmers have lost their production, and many of them will not have enough food that will last until the next lean season or even the next harvest season. We saw in the region food price going up for multiple reasons. Borders are still closed in the region. Conflict is disrupting trade in the region. And we also see in the region what the impact of the crisis in Ukraine on some key food commodities like wheat and oil. We also saw that in this region, displacement is increasing. We are talking about 6 million people displaced in the Sahel. Institutions are very fragile, and you have witnessed in the recent month different coup d'etat and conflict tensions in different parts of the region. So the region is really facing an extremely difficult situation, and millions of people will struggle to make it this year. Recently, we were in the field and we had the opportunity to meet people, to talk to farmers, to talk to traders, and most of them we met were worried. The farmers in particular, they are worried for the next agricultural season, mainly because many of them will not be able to access to fertilizers. The cost of fertilizers has increased by almost 30% in many places of this region due to the supply disruption that we see provoked by the crisis in Ukraine. In several markets we visited, we saw that this year the Ramadan, we are in the Ramadan period in West Africa. The Ramadan is going to be extremely difficult for millions of people in this region, where we see food price increasing by 30–50% in many places in the region. So for the poor families, bread is a key staple, is a key food. And we have seen in this region bread cost increasing by almost 20% in different places of the region. So poor families will hardly make it this year due to the shocks and the crisis in the region. The traders we met also are extremely worried. They are facing more and more challenges to supply the market. And in some markets we saw many traders mentioned the scarcity of certain basic food commodities like oil. The price are increased and those products are also not available due to, again, the crisis in Ukraine. This year, the response WFP and other humanitarian actors are providing, it's going to be extremely critical to scale up the response to meet a very complex and unprecedented operational environment. Both WFP and government need to also step up, address both the political issues. We talk about border closure, we talk about market disruption, we talk about conflict. To address those issues, open the border, free trade in the region. It's also important to look at short-term issues, address the need with emergency relief programs, shocks responsive and nutrition sensitive social protection systems, so that we can mitigate the impact of this crisis and help government to build a long-term system. Life-saving aid is needed in this region in this year. And the conflict elsewhere should not, derive the attention from this region. We need to build systems, food systems. We need to bring people on their feet and make sure that the next agricultural season, people will be able to again start their activities in a normal way. To continue our activities in this region, WFP will need more than 700 million people in the US dollar in the next 6 months. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much, sir. And we will hear a little bit more about Ukraine in a moment. I see Catherine Fiancon has a question for you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for taking my question, Alessandra. Sir, I would like, first, could you please repeat the amount needed that you mentioned at your last sentence, because it was not really clear, and by how much have prices increased lately related to the crisis of Ukraine, and what kind of initiatives have been taken, or do you plan to take in the coming weeks? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions. For the next 6 months, WFP will need $777 million to meet the urgent need of the people in the region. Price has increased between 30–50% in many places in the Sahel, and even in some markets, price has doubled in the region. And the increase of price, as I mentioned, is a compounded effect of poor harvest in the region, insecurity in the region, and on top of that, for certain commodity like wheat and bread that derive from wheat, we saw an increase recently, and those increases are mainly due to the conflict in Ukraine and the poor supply of wheat and oil from the Black Sea region. In terms of
maybe on your, Catherine asked you on your initiatives, if you've taken an initiative, or you're going to take some initiatives soon.
Yeah, and on the response that we are providing, I will say we are providing first it's the short-term response to make sure that we meet the most urgent need, and we also looking at the long-term solutions, right? And these are what I mentioned, especially engaging with governments so that they lift some of the barriers, the political barriers, like opening borders, like free trade, so that markets can be supplied in the normal way. We also make sure that we support systems, notably the social protection systems in the region through shock responsive and nutrition sensitive social protection systems.
Catherine, is that a follow-up, or is the hand from before?
No, it's a short follow-up, Alessandra, if you don't mind. You just mentioned that, in fact, for the next 6 months, $777 million meet the needs of how many people? Could you be clear about, please, the number of people that it will help? And also regarding the prices increase, you said 30 to 50%. Is it globally to wheat, oil, bread? Is it all of it? And what kind of exchanges do you have with governments? Are you trying to make them reduce the importation taxes? How practically do you work with governments in order for people to be able to buy the basic needs, their basic needs? Thank you.
Okay. For the upcoming lean season, we are planning to reach 22 million people in the Sahel, and Nigeria included. And the amount that we are requesting is to be able to meet the needs of those 22 million people in the region. We have a very high level engagement with the regional organization like ECOWAS. We are supporting right now on a policy paper, and that policy paper we are preparing and helping to have a political dialogue in May this year. And the objective of that political dialogue is exactly to tackle some of the political issues we just mentioned around border closure, around the need to lift all the barriers that are blocking trade in the region. And at national levels, with the relevant government, we are supporting what they call the National Response Plan. And each country has its own national response plan, and WFP is contributing to those national response plans.
Thank you very much, sir. Sorry. Thank you very much, sir. And thanks. I don't see other questions. And I just want to tell everybody that in the chat, Adriano has put the links to the new facility in the dedicated section of the FAO website on the conflict and its impact on food security. And I'll continue now with Ukraine, and thank you very much, Mr. Olo. I'll now continue with Ukraine by giving the floor to Jens Lerke for OCHA, and then to Matthew Saltmarsh for UNHCR. Let's start with you, Jens.
Thank you. Thank you, Alessandra, and good morning, everyone. I wanted to give you a little bit of a wrap up what has happened this week. Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths yesterday visited Kiev, where he met Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal and other government officials, and witnessed firsthand the scenes of death and destruction in the nearby towns of Bucha and Irpin following the withdrawal of Russian forces from the area. Mr. Griffiths is the first high-level United Nations official to visit Bucha. A return of international UN staff is expected in Kiev in coming days. His mission to Ukraine followed his visit to Moscow on Monday, where he met Foreign Minister Mr. Sergei Lavrov to explore the possible agreements and arrangements for a humanitarian ceasefire in Ukraine at the request of the Secretary General. Mr. Griffiths described his visit to Bucha as horrifying. He saw a mass grave that we were told contained 280 bodies and dozens of destroyed apartment blocks and houses. He echoed the Secretary General's call for an immediate independent investigation to ensure accountability. In Kiev, he reaffirmed to the government the United Nations commitment to helping those in need and protect them and provide humanitarian aid as quickly as possible. Within 6 weeks, UN agencies and humanitarian NGOs have dramatically scaled up operations, and some 160 partners are now present in all Ukraine's 24 oblasts. This compares to 6 weeks ago, when operations were limited to the 2 eastern oblasts of Donetsk and Luhansk. The UN and partners have now reached at least 2 million people with assistance and mobilized 4 interagency humanitarian convoys to reach thousands of people in desperate need in some of the hardest hit and most inaccessible areas, including Sumy, Kharkiv, and Severodonetsk. More interagency convoys are planned in coming days and weeks. Last night, the Emergency Relief Coordinator said that his first humanitarian concern is the need for safe passage and evacuations of civilians from encircled places of hell, Mariupol being the worst. He also warned that Luhansk and Donetsk are going to be of very high humanitarian concern and urged the 2 parties to the conflict to commit to each other to ensure safe passage of civilians out of those areas. Mr. Griffiths left Kiev this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jens, for these updates. And I'll turn to Mats for an update on the situation of the refugees.
Thank you, Alessandra, and good morning to everyone. I've got a briefing note on our assistance and aid inside Ukraine and in the region. The war in Ukraine has triggered one of the fastest growing displacement and humanitarian crises ever. Within 6 weeks, more than 4.2 million refugees have fled the country, while a further 7.1 million are displaced internally. As people continue to flee, UNHCR is working closely with local authorities in Ukraine to increase reception capacity. More core relief items are being distributed to reception and collective centers set up by the local authorities to expand their capacity to receive IDPs. Our teams are also working with the authorities in various locations to identify buildings needing refurbishment to serve as reception or collective centers. Delivering aid remains challenging in the parts of the country where there is active fighting. We continue striving to reach hard-hit areas such as Mariupol and Kherson with life-saving assistance as part of interagency humanitarian convoys, and have contributed to 4 such convoys under the humanitarian notification system. 2 to Sumy, 1 to Kharkiv, and 1 to Severodonetsk, and delivered several additional convoys with the help of partners, reaching 15,600 people with relief items. The latest such convoy was on the 6th of April, where UNHCR was among those carrying aid to Severodonetsk in Luhansk, eastern Ukraine. For weeks, people there have endured relentless shelling and shortages of basics like water, gas, and electricity. Our team was able to deliver solar lamps, blankets, hygiene kits, baby formula, and tarpaulin sheets. UNHCR, with NGO partners, continues providing protection services and referrals to authorities at border points and reception centres. Some 36,000 people have received such assistance and information at border points, transit and reception centres, and through hotlines. These services include legal assistance and psychosocial support, among other things. UNHCR also provides protection services closer to conflict hotspots at first points of arrival. UNHCR's partners are still present with a significant protection capacity in Donetsk and Luhansk, while in other areas directly exposed to hostilities, connections with communities established before the war have been reinforced, particularly in Zaporizhia, ensuring the distribution of aid. UNHCR is also continuing to send humanitarian supplies into Ukraine from Poland. To date, 96 UNHCR aid trucks have been sent from our warehouse in Rzeszów. Supplies include thermal blankets, regular blankets, numerous towels, tarpaulins, solar lamps, sleeping bags, jerry cans, kitchen sets, pillows, winter jackets, mattresses, boxes of winter clothes, quilts, and rub hauls. Poland remains the main country of arrival for refugees, having welcomed more than 2.5 million since the start of the war. While the pace of arrivals is slowing, overall flows continue given the ongoing hostilities. UNHCR staff have observed that newly arrived refugees are coming from various parts of the country, including the east, with some reporting having spent weeks hunkering down at home or in shelters in dire conditions. The priority needs identified by UNHCR for refugees receiving counselling at the UNHCR UNICEF Blue Dot Protection Hub in Warsaw include mental health and medical services, financial assistance, child protection and social services, accommodation, and access to employment. In Poland, Ukrainian refugees have access to a Polish state ID number, the PESEL. Over 700,000 Ukrainian refugees have registered with the authorities, allowing them access to health and other social support from the state. 94% of those registered are women and children. To enable refugees to prioritize and to complement the national authority-led response in Poland, UNHCR is expanding cash assistance. More than 10,000 people have registered in Warsaw over the past fortnight. UNHCR opened a second center in Krakow this week. Additional enrollment sites are opening soon in partnership with the state and national NGOs. The program plans to reach hundreds of thousands of people. On March the 1st, UNHCR launched the initial Regional Refugee Response Plan, the RRP, calling for some $550 million. Since then, under UNHCR coordination, interagency teams have been working on developing a fuller RRP reflecting current needs, and that will be detailed later in April. The revised RRP will cover 10 months up until December of this year and is expected to bring together 110 partners, including 50 local NGOs, faith-based organizations, and academia. The only thing I would add is that the High Commissioner visited Ukraine and Poland at the end of last week, and we issued a press release on that. He obviously stressed that the only way to protect civilians is to stop the shelling and the bombardment. Currently, our Assistant High Commissioner for Operations is in Romania and Moldova, wrapping up a visit there, and we will issue a press release at the end of that visit. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matthew, and thanks, Jens. I'll open the floor to the very numerous questions. I'll start with the room. Jeremy.
Hi. A question about for Jens, maybe. President Zelensky warned that the situation in Borodyanka, north of Kiev, I think, could be even worse than in Bucha, where a massacre could have been committed. Has the UN got any info on that, and is a team ready to go on the site? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. We are, of course, looking at and monitoring carefully what people on the ground are saying, where issues may arise. It is primarily our human rights colleagues who will be involved in monitoring and going to try to investigate such situations. What I did mention was that it is expected to have a rather large-scale return of international United Nations agencies to Kiev in coming days. As you know, UN aid didn't stop. UN aid has continued to be delivered throughout the war in Kiev through our local partners. But there was a temporary relocation of staff. They are now coming back, and I'm sure our colleagues at the Human Rights Office are part of that.
Yeah, Jeremy, I'd be happy to send your question to the, and I'm pretty sure that interests everybody. So I'll ask colleagues from the human rights if they can answer it in writing. Body.
Yes, I have a question to you. What I understood your statement from Kiev this morning. I wonder just to know, when were you made this commitment with Mr. Lavrov that the ceasefire and the access of humanitarian? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bodhi. For now, we don't have a commitment to any ceasefires from any of the two parties. We have started, or Martin Griffiths has started the process of presenting his ideas, listening to their ideas and response. He was in Moscow and met Lavrov and other government officials, including from the Ministry of Defense on Monday. He briefed the Security Council on Tuesday about some of that. He then went to Kiev and was there yesterday. He has now left Kiev and they are exiting the country as I speak. So his role is, as mandated by the Secretary General, to go and explore what are the opportunities. What he did make very clear yesterday and the day before is that there is a long road ahead. It's a road that will be traveled. He is confident that some result will be achieved. He has also said that don't expect today or tomorrow or the day after a nationwide ceasefire. That is his analysis of it. But what is important is to get the parties to agree on local ceasefires, localized ceasefires. And he said top priority of that is to get silencing of the guns in those cities, with Mariupol being the worst affected, those cities where civilians are trapped, to allow them to get to safety voluntarily to a place of their choosing, and to allow aid to get in. So this is an incremental process in which, of course, humanitarian aid will play a crucial role.
Thank you. You have a follow-up, buddy? Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I follow up that. Do you have any updates from yesterday or after yesterday was a decision from GA that Russian suspended from HRC? Thank you.
For whom is this question? For Jens or Rolando?
Yeah, regarding to humanitarian aids. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thanks. As the question was direct to me, I will immediately pass it on to my human rights colleagues, because I do believe it is a separate issue. I don't know of any reactions from.
Okay,
Russia.
we have Rolando on the line, so I'll ask him if he can. Rolando, I don't know if you understood the question from Body.
Yes. Hello.
Go ahead.
Hi. Right. Sorry for that. The reaction. Well, I can. What if you could rephrase the question, Buddy? I'm not sure what it is you're looking for. Reaction to yesterday's decision at the GA. Could you rephrase that, please?
Well, frankly, my question to Jens about the humanitarian, but for you, much more better, probably. That. So, do you have any reaction or got any reaction from Russian side And what's the process after not withdraw but suspended from HRC? Is that anyone could success, or how would we react? Thank you.
Okay, sure. I think if I understood correctly, a reaction from the Russian side, I can only confirm that there was a letter that was sent to the President of the Council following the General Assembly adoption yesterday. The adoption, as you know, was to suspend the membership rights of the Russian Federation. Shortly after that, the Russian Federation itself decided to relinquish its membership. So in effect, they become observers. And that is spelled out in the letter that was sent to the President of the Human Rights Council, Ambassador Villegas, last night. That has just been posted about 15 minutes ago, so I'd be happy to share that with you for those interested. In terms of now that the Russian Federation has relinquished its membership on the Human Rights Council, that frees up their seat. That said, there will need to be elections at the General Assembly to fill that one spot from the Eastern European group. We don't know when that will take place, but that would need to be the case, as there are currently 46 members. But just to be very, very clear about this, the end result of all the action yesterday was that the Russian Federation is no longer a member of the Human Rights Council.
Thank you, Rolando. And Bodhi, I'll draw your attention to the UN News website, where a press release was published just after the vote, which reported a number of reactions to the vote, including the Russian ambassador's reaction. So let's go ahead. We have a lot of questions here. Next one I had seen in the room, no, probably not. So I'll go to the platform. Let's start with Laurent. Laurent, remember you have to, okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for taking my question. Jens, could you give us more indications on the return of international staff in the next days, in terms of volume, arrival, agencies that will be part of this return? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laurent. It's, as usual, an excellent question. I don't have it. This is something that is managed by the UN Department for Safety and Security, the DSS. So I simply don't have that, those specific details. I know for a fact that Martin Griffiths told the government and assured the government in Kiev that a return of international staff and UN leadership is on its way to Kiev.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thanks, Alessandra. Good morning, Jens. I have a question for you. Could you flesh out a bit more the meeting that Griffiths had with Lavrov? Did they only deal with a possible ceasefire and humanitarian corridors or ability to get aid into the people, or did he address the issue of the atrocities which reportedly have been committed by Russian soldiers in Bucha and elsewhere around the country, atrocities that the Russian government, everybody, Lavrov included, says never happened, at least not on their watch, that it's the Ukrainians that are killing their own people in the most atrocious manner? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Martin was indeed asked that yesterday, and his answer was that yes, I go to the Russian side, I go to the Ukrainian side, and I tell things as I see them with the information I have. That is my privilege as a humanitarian, to lay out the facts as I know them. He also said that in Moscow, the Russian side had a different view of those facts, and that's where we are at this point. He has also said that he and his Russian counterparts considered that meeting a first round, was the way he described it. meaning that he certainly expects to go back and continue those very important discussions as asked by the Secretary General that he pursue to find a humanitarian ceasefire or any variant of a humanitarian ceasefire, meaning localized ceasefires for any length of time. We are, of course, always asking for as long a period, for example, for a localized ceasefire where you have evacuations of people going out and convoys coming in, that is as long as possible. Just to have 2 hours is normally not enough. There are huge decisions involved for people who are asked on very short notice to leave everything they have and everything they own and everything they know and disappear from their homes. They're very difficult decisions for people there to make. So they need time. They need to know where they are going. It needs to be sure that it's voluntary. So there are, as I say, several levels of pauses that can be employed, and those are the ideas that he's discussing with both parties, of which we have now seen the first round.
Nick.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. Yeah, Jens, I just wondered specifically what Mr. Griffiths was able to come back from Moscow with in regard to access to Mariupol. You say it's a priority for the UN. What specifically was the response he got to requests for access to that? And when you say there's a return of UN staff, could you just elaborate? Will that be purely to Kiev, or are you also expecting to see a return of UN staff to other locations across the country? Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. What Martin Griffiths said yesterday is that there is a common interest, an objective common interest in having a ceasefire in Mariupol and other places. That does not necessarily mean that the two parties have agreed with each other exactly how that interest can lead to a ceasefire. But there's an interest, an objective interest in protecting civilians. And everybody he's speaking to are saying that, yes, IHL, international humanitarian law, should be upheld and civilians should be protected. Now, when we have, as we have seen over the past couple of weeks, several unsuccessful attempts at evacuations, then immediately, the blame game starts. And it's impossible to know what happened. What is possible to know is that clearly the two parties did not agree with each other on the technicalities of those ceasefires to be put in place. So that we continue to pursue, of course, in close collaboration and communication with our colleagues at the ICRC. In terms of return, what we have seen is that at the beginning of the crisis, there was a relocation, a temporary relocation to the west of the country. We all know that there's a big hub, a big concentration in Lviv. You've been briefed many times by our colleagues there. Now, those people are moving slowly but surely and within the confines of the security situation towards the east. There are identified hubs where people are already going back. We have also been briefed from places such as Dnipro, which is certainly emerging as a humanitarian hub from where we can reach people in need. The underlying idea is, of course, to get as physically close to people who are most in need as possible. So the return to Kiev is certainly not the only movement that has been happening, and it's not only something that's happening now. We have seen over the past couple of weeks this movement into these hubs where agencies are establishing themselves.
Thank you. Emma.
Yes, thanks. I was wondering about as fighting intensifies in the east, how is this affecting your planning? Jens, you just mentioned that, but specifically, are there efforts to avoid Mariupol type situation in other Eastern cities? And if so, are you urging civilians to get them out in advance, or is UNHCR actually coordinating this? And then yesterday, the WHO talked about contingency planning for chemical assaults. Is that part of UN agencies' planning as well? Do you have specific medicines like iodine or nuclear contamination drugs that are part of your aid packages, and are they at scale? Thanks.
Okay. Hi, Emma. Thanks. I think on the last one, I would probably like to hear if WHO is.
We have Fadela online,
because that would likely be something they can speak about. Martin Griffiths was very clear yesterday that, given the dynamics of the conflict, Luhansk and Donetsk are again becoming areas of heightened humanitarian concern. The fighting is already, you can see it in the news this morning, moving there. Now, there is, frankly speaking, fairly little that we can do about where the fighting goes, apart from insisting on the protection of civilians wherever hostilities are playing out. Now, he was very clear yesterday also that we need to have these agreements of localized ceasefires, pauses in hostilities, windows of silence, call it what you will, whereby the civilians in these areas and in Luhansk and Donetsk, they have pretty much been, unable to move anywhere for a long time, whereby they can escape to safer places. So hopefully we will not see more Mariupols around the country. But in the meantime, of course, we try to push aid in there as much as we can. People are still hunkered down in basements in Luhansk and Donetsk. We have in our planning convoys to go there. I understand already next week. Everything, again, whether that happens or not, depends on the security situation. But it will be ready to go there if we can get in.
Just to ask Fadela, if you want to add anything, Fadela, on the issue of the preparation for possible chemical attacks, as mentioned yesterday by your colleague of the European office.
Yeah, thank you, Alessandra. Thank you, Emma, for the question. As you may know, WHO is helping the Ministry of Health of Ukraine and other health partners to get prepared for any event of chemical incident. We are not going to investigate the perpetrators or the event itself, but we are a global health agency. So what we have done so far is to provide training for almost 1,500 health workers to know the health impact of any chemical incident. And we have also provided guidance to health authorities and our partners on the ground. For example, WHO is also issuing public health guidance on the response to chemical event, including public risk communication. We are also providing basic and advanced health responder training to public health officials, clinicians, ambulance teams, medical teams, and other health partners. And we are also supplying therapeutics and consumables enough to treat up to 1,500 patients with chemical exposures, and more importantly, personal protective equipment to health responders. This is what I can tell you about what WHO is doing in case of a chemical incident. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fadela. Sorry. Tamer.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for taking my question. My question is for UNHCR and regarding the Palestinian refugees in the Ukraine. It is known that Ukraine hosted many Palestinians as a refugee for years. What about the situation of these Palestinians? They have to leave the country, and if you have numbers, and where and which status they will have in the new country. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I'm afraid I don't have an update in terms of any numbers of Palestinian refugees inside Ukraine. So let me look into that, and we can perhaps consult with UNRWA, and we can get back to you later in the day with an update on that.
Thank you, Matt. Gabriela?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Alessandra. Two questions. One, if someone can answer if there are evidence of sexual violence used like an armed war in Ukraine, if there are some allegations. There are some allegations, but I don't know if someone can answer that. Maybe Fadela. And also if WHO is preparing the people for an event of a nuclear tactic attack, maybe. And to Rolando, Russia was suspended, but Russia is still responsible to answer to the Commission of Inquiry. I mean, their responsibilities, what exactly does that mean if they are still, if they have to answer to the Commission of Inquiry? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have details of the issue of sexual violence. We would have to ask also maybe our colleagues of human rights, unless any of my colleagues from the humanitarian side, but I see heads not nodding. So I'll come back to you on this, Gabriela, because for the moment I don't have information about this that I can share with you. The second question, who would like to? Maybe WHO, would you, Fadela, answer the second point on the preparations for possible nuclear attacks? Margaret is also online. Okay, whether Margaret or Fadela.
Hi.
Auntie, okay, you're on, Fadela. Go ahead.
The question was from Emma about the chemical attacks, and I responded.
Oh, this one would be about possibility of nuclear attacks and whether WHO is doing anything to prepare on the possible nuclear attacks.
I will have to come back to you with an answer later on. Unfortunately, Tariq, who is our focal point in Ukraine, is on the move, so he wasn't able to join, but I will come back to you after this briefing.
Fadel, I think this would be something of interest to everybody. So if you have any update, maybe if you can share with all the journalists, that would be appreciated. Rolando, on the question from Gabriela on the accountability of the Russia, even if now he's not member of the council anymore.
Thanks for the question. Maybe before I get to that, maybe just to highlight that the sexual and gender-based violence is certainly something that the Commission of Inquiry in Ukraine will be looking pointedly at. This is their remit. They are meeting, and they are soon will be operational. But of course, there's also the Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, which has been operational since 2014, which is collecting evidence on the ground since then, and certainly after 24 February. Any evidence which could amount to war crimes or crimes against humanity. So these are very important notes that the work, in a sense, through that process, the Commission of Inquiry is working already and there are many processes and lots of evidence that is already feeding into their process of investigating human rights violations. First point. In terms of accountability, that would be perhaps the most important message, is to hold perpetrators accountable for these horrific allegations of human rights violations that we're hearing rampantly committed throughout the country in the wake of the aggression in particular. Now, it's up to the state concerned to cooperate or not. There's nothing that we can do to force them to do that. The Russians have made their position very clear on the resolution that was adopted on the 4th of March and more recently since the General Assembly resolution that was adopted yesterday. But again, I point out very clearly that the end result of yesterday's vote and all the action that took place yesterday is Russian Federation is no longer a member of the Human Rights Council. Now, that does not exclude them from participating with the Commissions of Inquiry, or of course, or any other mechanism. They just would not be able to participate in the Human Rights Council as an observer. So that's a very important point.
Indeed, John.
Yes, good morning. My question is both to Jens and to Fadela. Yesterday, the director of the Regional Office for Europe said there had been 103 attacks on health in a 6-week period. And the OCHA reported the day before there had been 91. So I'm interested to know where the 12 attacks occurred on the 7th. And I have a follow-up question on something else. Thanks.
Thank you, John. It's always good to listen to Hans Kluge, I believe you are referring to. I will leave it with WHO because they are tracking this on their website. Sometimes there's a difference between health facilities, health workers, you know, they're different categories. So there's probably a discrepancy in the category.
Yes, indeed. Fadela, I don't know if you want to say something on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, John, Dr. Kluge, Dr. Tedros spoke yesterday about health attacks in Ukraine, and we followed up with a press release late in the evening to inform you about a sad milestone that has been reached yesterday in the war in Ukraine, with more than 100 attacks on healthcare verified by WHO since the start of the war on February 24th. The attacks so far have claimed 73 lives and injured 51 people. So of the current total of 103 attacks, 89 have impacted health facilities and 13 have impacted transport, including ambulances. As we said continuously, attacks on healthcare that are continuing are a violation of international humanitarian law, and the peace is the only way forward. As you may know, also the impact of this violence is not only immediate in the number of deaths and injured, it's also a destruction of the health system of Ukraine, and also preventing people to get health care because the health facilities are damaged or they are afraid to go there, and the impact on health, well-being and mental health is enormous. As you know, WHO is monitoring the health attacks on health. We cannot really be precise about the location in order to protect the witnesses, the survivors, and also the source of information we have on this attacks. Thank you, John.
John, you had a follow-up.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
yes.
Yes. My question is to Jens. Did Mr. Griffiths visit some of the health facilities that have been destroyed? And secondly, in a follow-up to Fadela's question, some of these facilities destroyed are public buildings, so I can understand protecting sources, but when the damage has been documented by authorities, surely you can share that.
Thanks, John. Martin Griffiths did not visit health facilities yesterday in Kiev. As I mentioned, he visited Bucha, Irpin, and then the central government in there. However, he has not left Ukraine. He has left Kiev. He's still in Ukraine. So he may visit something today. I don't have a readout of that yet, so I'm not excluding it.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to the next question. Is from Peter Kenny.
Yeah, thanks. My question is following on from John's because these numbers of attacks on health was quite rapid. It went from 90 in the morning, well, at midday, to 100 in the evening, and that is a big jump. Does it look like health facilities are increasingly being targeted? Has the number of attacks on health accelerated? Is it possible to comment on that? Thank you.
Wait, we can't hear you. Maybe you have to.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Peter, yeah, as I told you, we had to communicate about the increasing number of health attacks in Ukraine. Health attacks are, as I said, a violation of international humanitarian law and human rights law. And a health attack can be against the personal, patient, transport mechanism or facilities. All these facilities should never be a target. So what we are doing at WHO, and we are mandated by the World Health Assembly to do so, is to document attacks on health, not only in Ukraine but worldwide. And as I told you, we cannot really specify the location or identify the affected healthcare facilities for reason of security. We do not share data beyond the information published on the surveillance system for attacks on health cases. Just maybe to put things in perspective, attacks on healthcare, unfortunately, seen amid conflict globally, are something that are unfortunately common. For example, since the 1st January this year, WHO has verified 160 attacks on healthcare in 11 countries and territories, resulting in 97 deaths and 74 injured. Outside Ukraine, for example, Sudan is also witnessing a recent increase in attacks on health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question. Peter, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks for enlightening us on where the WHO stands on attacks on health. My question was, from the midday till the evening, there was an increase of 10. That's like a bigger than 10% increase in one day. My question is according to your data, I don't know, I need to know where they were, but is the intensity of such attacks increasing? Thank you.
Peter, I will have to ask our expert, but as far as I know, there is, I mean, they verify the attacks, and I don't know when they happen exactly. So it could be a backlog of cases that they were able to put in the database yesterday. But I will have to come back to you about the information you are requesting.
Fadela, thank you very much. I have a last question from Catherine. Just wanted to tell you, because you have to brief afterwards. Si tu as un casque, est-ce que tu peux le mettre? Parce qu'on entend, il y a un fort bruit de fond. Pardon. Catherine.
Merci, Alessandra. It is a follow-up for Fadela. Good morning, Fadela. You did mention in your answer to Emma, if I'm not wrong, that you were or you had trained more than 1,200 people. I would like to know where these people are. Are they in Ukraine? Are they in the neighboring countries? Where are they? Another question also related to Ukraine. Apparently, vaccination rates in Ukraine, vaccination rate related to COVID-19 was very low. something like around 35%. What are you doing? What is WHO doing to monitor these cases when they cross a bit the borders in the neighboring countries, and also related to TB? Because apparently there's a high percentage of people infected by TB. So what kind of measures are you taking for that? And I have a question also for human rights, if someone from human rights is there. Alessandra? Is there some...
We have Rolando on the line, but not from the OHCHR. But I'm sending, in fact, your questions to them. So if you have specific...
Okay, because I would like to know if, as we say that in Ukraine, the authorities are in fact monitoring the cases, rape, murders. Is there anyone, international people that are in Ukraine on the side of the Ukrainian authorities? Is there anyone from human rights? Or have they placed a request? Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask them, but human rights has staff in Ukraine where they are deployed, and exactly what they are doing in connection with these allegations, I'd have to ask. Fadela.
Thank you, Catherine. For your question about COVID-19 vaccination, what I can tell you is vaccination for COVID-19 has been disrupted because of the conflict. Prior to the conflict, at least 50,000 people per day were receiving vaccination against COVID-19. This number has declined significantly, with only 175,000 people receiving vaccination between 24th February and 15 March. I can send you all the details in an email, but the vaccination has been disrupted very dangerously in the country. For TB, I believe we sent a press release recently on the situation of TB and HIV in Ukraine. I can look at it and send it to you. For your question about who are these people who have been trained to respond to any chemical incident, these are 1,500 health workers in the region that we trained to be able to assess the health impact of any chemical attack, and also to be able to help people in case of a chemical attack. They are, I mean, in the region, the training was done in person or online, and many guidance were distributed to a wide range of health responders in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have just sent now the questions to our colleagues of OHCHR, the 3 questions that were asked during the briefing. Catherine, you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Alessandra. A short one. Fadela, in fact, my question is more, do you have any way to check the people, the Ukrainian refugees, before sending them out to different countries? Are you checking if they are COVID-19 infected? Are you checking if they are TB infected? Is there a checking? Because of course, if you send them without checking anything before they arrive in their new countries, they can infect the local population.
Let me check with our office in Europe, but I believe what happens usually in this kind of situation is the refugee and people leaving Ukraine will be taken care of by the local health authorities in Poland, in Romania, in Moldova, in all countries that are receiving refugees where they are offered healthcare they need. But because of the war, of course, a lot of people will not have access to testing or to vaccination or to other means of health care. But I believe the health care is given by the local authorities in the host countries. Thank you.
Thank you. John, and then Bob.
Yes, my question is to Rolando. Rolando, in a follow-up to what Fadela was touching, you have a big team of human rights monitors in Ukraine, and given that the right to health is enshrined in the human rights law since 2002, do your monitors, are your monitors in the field documenting the attacks with details that the WHO is not sharing, even though the WHO World Health Assembly in 2012 passed a resolution asking for the details to be shared with the ICRC jointly working on this project? So my question is, what is the human rights arm doing on this, given that there's no visibility from WHO?
Yeah, thanks for your question, John. I think these are I think our colleagues at the office are better placed, who are in direct contact with the Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine. But just to emphasize, yes, they are on the ground. I don't know specifically where they're employed or deployed, excuse me. That said, of course, the High Commissioner gave, I should point out that on the 30th of March, the High Commissioner did deliver a sobering update to the Human Rights Council, which included these types of allegations. I wouldn't be able to go beyond that. I would only point you to either Liz or Ravina to give you specifics of these types of violations that you're speaking of.
Indeed. Okay, so Body, sorry, Body.
Question for WHO. I'd like to know what's the new behavior of vaccination for children on COVID-19. And I remember last time you delegated children has been not recommended to vaccinate to be not vaccination, but you respected it for all the policy of all countries. Is that new or?
The question was about vaccinating children in Ukraine. It wasn't very clear.
In general of COVID-19. The COVID-19, the vaccination for children of COVID-19. No Ukraine, general.
So
okay, if we don't speak about Ukraine anymore, just 1 second, because she has many things to say. So let me see if there's any other questions specifically on Ukraine, which I don't see. Okay, and then Fadela, in this case, let me thank Jens and Matt who are still here on the podium, and maybe give you the floor if you want to start with your briefing and then answer Body's question. And maybe there are other questions for you. But Fadela, really, it's very hard to understand what you say. If you could, if you have some ways of reducing the background noise, it would be really much clearer.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. Can you hear me better now?
We can hear you well. Is the background noise that's very disturbing? But okay, just go ahead.
So do you want me to brief about the announcement?
Yeah, and or before or after answering Body's question in general on the vaccination of COVID-19 of children to COVID-19.
This will be a very long briefing if I had to answer Body's question about the whole vaccination of children, vaccinating children against COVID-19. So it will warrant a full briefing that I am not able to do now. So Body, I will send you the links to all our recommendations on vaccinating children against COVID-19 in an email. So maybe just to come back to the question of Catherine about TB patient in Ukraine, maybe just if I can add one thing, because WHO is working with partners and health authorities of neighboring countries to ensure access to antiviral therapy and TB and drug TB treatment for refugees who require continuation of treatment outside of Ukraine. WHO has also developed tools to estimate the number of people living with HIV and TB among the refugee population to support resource planning for the refugee hosting countries and not to discontinue treatment for people living with HIV and TB. As you know, Ukraine has really a high level of people living with HIV and TB in the European region. So if you allow me, Alessandra, I will go to two announcements for next week, very important ones. As you may know, there is a meeting of the SAGE. Let me just find my notes. Sorry for that. At its regular meeting held from the 4th to the 7th April of this year, SAGE, which is the strategic advisory group of experts on immunization, held its meeting this week, and we will be able to brief you about the outcome and the conclusions at a press conference on Monday at 4 p.m. I believe you have been sent a media invitation to attend this briefing with three experts: Dr. Alejandro Cravioto, who is the chair of the SAGE, Dr. Kate O'Brien, director of immunization, vaccine and biological, and Dr. Joachim Hombach, executive secretary of SAGE. So what was discussed at this week meeting? They reviewed vaccine policy issues, including the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and COVID-19 vaccination on immunization services worldwide, infection and vaccination-induced immunity, use of the hepatitis A vaccine and the typhoid conjugate vaccine, and very important also the changes to the HPV vaccination schedule and the polio eradication program. So you will be briefed about all these different issues at 4 p.m. on Monday. Margaret Harris is the focal point on this. The second announcement I would like to make is 11th of April is also the 11th meeting of the emergency committee on COVID-19. They will meet in the afternoon, and the recommendation of the emergency committee will come later on in the week. Over to you, Alessandra.
Thank you very much, Fadela. I see Emma has raised her hand.
Thanks, Fadela. There's a lot going on at the WHO. I actually wanted to ask you about the public consultations on the pandemic treaty. Is this the first time that the WHO has done such a kind of open, public, civil society type consultation? And what's the significance of that? And do you plan any more? I had heard you might do one on governance issues and SEAH. And just secondly, mortality figures for COVID. I'd understood they were in the pipeline. Any update?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Emma. Yes, a lot of things going on at WHO. For the WHO public hearing regarding a new international instrument on pandemic preparedness and response that we sent yesterday as a follow-up to the 1st April announcement that we are holding this public hearing. What I can tell you is the second time, as far as I know, that we are organizing such public hearing. It was about tobacco a few years ago.
Christophe?
Yes, my question, hi Fadela, my question was about the second meeting that is happening of the emergency committee. You're telling us that we will be briefed on that later during the week. I might just remind everybody that it's Easter, it's going to be tricky. So if you have any closer idea or better, if you can give us a better sense of when exactly we'll be briefed on that, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
As you know that we have the meeting of the emergency committee regularly every 3 months. So they are meeting in the afternoon of the 11th April. They will review the current status of the pandemic, progress made in implementing the temporary recommendation since the last meeting in January, I believe. And they will provide their advice to the Director General. So usually this is the way we do this, the communication about the emergency committee. They meet. During a few days, they will prepare the statement. The statement will then go to the DG. The DG will accept them or not, and we will inform member state, and then we will inform the media. So I can't really tell you when we will release the recommendation of the EC, but usually it's 3-4 days after the meeting. And we are working during Easter time.
Yeah, and which actually makes me remind you that we will not be working on the Friday before Easter. As you know, the Palais des Nations is closed, so there won't be any briefing on that day, which, if I'm not wrong, is the 15th, Friday 15th, and Monday 18, the Palais des Nations is closed, so the briefing of the 15th will not take place. But I'm sure that Christophe will be here to hear from WHO. Emma had a follow-up. I think it's about the COVID mortality figures, Emma?
Yeah, that's right. Any idea of when to expect that, please, Fadela?
I guess, Emma, you are asking about the report of the excess mortality from COVID-19. We are still working on a date. Could be April or May. We'll let you know when it's ready to go.
Thank you very much, Fadela. We've got a few announcements for you. We have spoken a lot about human rights, although our colleagues could not be here. I just wanted to remind you that on Tuesday, 12th of April at 4 p.m., there will be an hybrid press conference by the Committee on Enforced Disappearances to present the findings on Greece, Niger, and Mexico. It's a hybrid press conference. Some of the speakers will be in this room, some others will be online, and the chair of the committee will be there with the member of the committee's Mexico delegation and the secretary of the committee, while the other speakers, including the vice chairman rapporteur on Greece, the rapporteur on Niger, a member of the CED Mexico delegation, and another member of this delegation will be on Zoom. You have the list of the speakers, their name and titles in the announcement we have sent to you. Also on the 12th of April at noon, at 12 noon Geneva time, we will have a press conference. In fact, there will be a press conference organized by the World Trade Organization. It will not be here, of course, it will be in room D of the WTO building. It will be a hybrid press conference, so you can participate either in person or virtually. The speakers of this press conference who will focus on the release of the WTO trade forecasts will be WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, WTO Chief Economist Robert Koopman, Senior Economist Coleman Nee, and the spokesperson Keith Rockwell with Spanish and French interpretations. Of course, you can contact the press briefing at WTO.org for more information. And finally, the meetings of the committees on the protection of the rights of migrant workers and members of their families will conclude this afternoon its 34th session, and will issue concluding observation on Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde, and Paraguay. We have spoken about the Committee on Enforced Disappearances, about their press conference, but they will also finish their session this afternoon on these two countries, Greece and Niger. And the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination will open next Monday, the 11th of April at 10 a.m. its 106th session, which will last until the 29th of April, during which they will review the reports of Cameroon, Luxembourg, Estonia, and Kazakhstan. I think I have given you all the information I had. I hope we will be able to come back to you on the questions that we were not able to answer today. Otherwise, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, I wish you a very good weekend and see you next week. Thank you.
Recording stopped.